Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rokaya Alvi. I am a senior evaluation consultant at PTG International, and welcome to our third installment of the Art of Evaluation. We have our four amazing panelists with us today. So I am going to give them a chance to introduce themselves and what they do for their respective organizations. So Lisa, if you could please start us off.
Sure. Thank you, Rakai. My name is Lisa Wilson, and I am with the Internal Revenue Service. I am a management and program analyst in the service-wide training evaluation program, and I'm currently acting program manager for that as well.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. Nelson, can you please introduce yourself?
All right, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. First of all, thank you, TOC, for inviting me as one of the panelists. And another big thank you to TOC for connecting Denise Medeiros and I at one of the annual conferences. And that resulted in a very successful implementation of the 2020 decennial census training. I'm formally trained in instructional system design with a background in engineering. And that's it, I'm very inquisitive and enjoy finding problems, well, in a good way, and providing innovative solution. So prior to joining the census, I was with the U.S. Postal Service for the past 8 years, involving a lot in their learning or their training transformation initiative. And we had successfully reduced 96% residence-based classroom training to 66% blended training for over 700,000 trainees. So having accomplished that, I was looking for the next best thing, and lo and behold, there comes 2015. There is an opportunity to work at the Census Bureau, and in particularly, for the 2020 decennial. And so I just wanted to be a part of something bigger, and that's where I jumped into it.
Awesome. Thank you, Nelson. Dustin, can you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Welcome, everyone. First of all, thank you for taking time out of your day to be here talking about this topic. It's near and dear to my heart, and Denise and I have talked about it ad nauseum in the past. So I agree with the other panelists about the importance of this topic. I myself right now have exited from the federal workforce. I am the Vice President and Chief Learning Officer here at the American Staffing Association now. But prior to that, I was the Deputy Chief Learning Officer over at the United States Patent and Trademark Office, and come through a long line of instructional designers, planners, trainers. I've done it all in the classroom, behind the scenes, e-learning, designing programs, project management. I cut my teeth in the federal workspace at the National Labor Relations Board there. But prior to that, in training in the classroom every day of the week, and in a far off distant time, I was a middle school teacher. And so, as you know, many of you are going back to school now. Thank your teachers, because I much prefer working with adults. It's not the kids, it's administration, other sort of things. So I'm so happy to be serving, all the adults out there who are trying to learn and improve and grow their careers. So thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you all for being here. We are actually hoping to have one more panelist. And while we're waiting for him, I'm just going to go ahead and we'll get started. So
that sounds good. We can let you know that our next panelist is Frank Johnson. He's in the room. He can see us. So maybe Shanda can reach out to him and make sure that he's using the appropriate link to be connected in. But Frank Johnson is with the TSA, and he is the head of the evaluation department there that evaluates all of the training for the TSA, and is very focused on the training for the transportation security officers. That anybody who has traveled and has had to fly knows what those transportation security officers look like, because we've all gone through the TSA checkpoints. So And Frank heads up the evaluation of all the training for those individuals. So hopefully we'll be seeing him soon. Here it comes.
There he is.
So we're excited
Good
to get
afternoon.
started.
Okay, so
Frank just joined the panelist. I just promoted him to panelist, so he should be on as a panelist now. I do see him there. Thank you,
There he
Frank.
is.
good
Yay.
afternoon.
Afternoon. Thanks for working with me. Appreciate it.
Sure. Thanks for being here. So Frank, we just went over introductions and we did give an overview of what you do at the TSA. So we're going to get
And you
started.
did a good job.
Awesome. So we are going to go ahead and get started with our questions. So the first question that I would like to pose to panelists is, what questions are your senior leaders asking that evaluation data is helping you answer? Frank, I see you smiling. So is this something you want to start off with?
I heard the first half of the question, and immediately the answer that came to mind was the wrong questions. No, but I think one of the questions that they're asking that the evaluation is helping to answer, and this seems to be the only one that a lot of them are concerned with initially, is, are participants or students satisfied with the course? They want to know if people who are sitting through them are feeling good when they leave about the time that they spent inside the course. And evaluations does help with that, especially if you ask the questions correctly with other qualifying questions, and then you do the analysis, because just asking someone if they enjoyed the class doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing a good job. It means that you had good Wi-Fi and they were able to text their friends. It could mean that they really enjoyed listening to the rambling stories of the facilitator, or it could mean that they actually enjoyed the curriculum. You don't know until you ask those amplifying questions. But whether or not participants are leaving with a positive feeling about them from a course, that's one of the things that we're answering.
Awesome. Anybody else? Lisa.
Like Frank, our senior leadership is definitely interested in the reaction to the training, but we do also report out on average test scores from our level 2 results, and they are very interested in results from our level 3, where our participants able to apply what they learned in training. And we report out on compliance measures, how many of our program managers are actually fulfilling their responsibilities with evaluation, and getting everything into our evaluation management system, Tempo. But one of the things that they are continually asking us, especially with the pandemic, is whether our efforts to convert some of our in-person training to virtual training or electronic-based training are successful. So we are reporting out on that separately, comparing the results, level 1 reaction results from in-person versus asynchronous training as well.
Awesome.
Lisa, can I jump off that, because I think that's important, and Frank was kind of headed there too. Is they don't know the right questions to ask, and a lot of times they're coming in with assumptions, and it's important, like we said, to start collecting data that are going to challenge those assumptions. With the e-learning, e-learning is a classic example. They're like, there's a bias towards classroom being there. A lot of times we know it, but we know, as training specialists and people that have been in the field, that's not necessarily true if it's using the right tool at the right time and to get the biggest impact. But for them, their biases are often driving that. And without the lack of data to show it that a means of like e-learning can be just as effective or impactful as any other mode that we might have out there, that bias or that assumption is going to, be the prevailing bias that's in there. And I ran up against that even in senior meetings where they say, why should we invest this much? We have trainers, let's put them in the classroom. And so it's really hard hump to overcome. And I'll say that one. And the other only other thing I was going to chime in there, and this happened through both the agencies I worked with, was that question of, and it's insulting almost, but why? Why do we need to? They will say ad nauseum, like, we agree that training is important. And I ask them the question, why do you think training is important? Because we've got to have training. Like, but why? Because career development. I'm like, but why career development? And they'll ask the same question back. It's like, what value do they have? Because some of them, senior leaders, don't understand the value of HR initiatives or training and development programs. So, a lot of times they'll ask me to defend my programs against some other programs that they already have a bias for, you that are keeping the lights on, that has a tangible link towards ROI, or, in the federal space, we say ROI, but they're ignoring those same tangible benefits from training and development. So that's the tricky issue there.
So on my side of the house, they really asked 3 questions, right? Because every 10 years we conducted the annual census, and we hired the largest temporary workers. So this time we hired over 400,000 trainees or data collectors. And one of the key challenges is, how do we standardize and yet have a very effective, blended training program? So for the past, 200 years, we have been, training them using paper-based training. So we basically, print out a lot of, participant guides, facilitator guides on paper. And I could imagine how, chaotic it will be, because if there's any changes in the training instruction, they have to send out errata sheets, for them to print. And so this year is really, this 2020 census is really groundbreaking, because we really, did not look back, we look forward, and we use a blended solution of online training and classroom training. But once the pandemic hit, and we actually, use that and convert classroom training to conference call. And based on that evaluation results, and it is actually very positive, and I got a lot of accolades for that. So the first question is, to what extent are the blended training programs effective, right? Because this is the first time we are doing it. Senior leadership definitely is very interested. The second question they're asking me is, what are the measures to ensure trainees' readiness after training for production work? So every hour of training they take, we have to pay them. So if you talk about, we have 3 major operations that uses the blended training methodology, and they can take as many as 30 hours. And again, there are some outliers that, most recently I have one that says I take about 150 hours to complete, 20 hours of training. So we have to dig it down into, what's going on. But essentially they're looking for, are the trainees ready, after they have done the training and ready for production work, all right? Because we want to get them in and get them out, to the field to do the data collection. And the third question is, to what extent are the summative training assessment valid and reliable? Because that is the only objective way we can say whether did the person, acquire the new knowledge and skills after training. And if you're not ready, they have to be observed. And so we kind of get down to an, we call it the art of the evaluation. We really come down to the science of it, by doing the math. If the person did not meet the minimum passing score of 70%, they have to be observed. And this is kind of like the three key questions that senior leaders are asking.
I attest to that. As we were collecting and analyzing the data that we collected from the census effort, I can share with you that it was really fortuitous that Nelson had put in the blended approach, because it was the blended approach to training that really allowed them to be able to pivot so quickly due to the changes needed because of COVID, and allowed them to continue to be successful with that training. And we were able to collect the data that showed that that training was successful, because we not only collected how people reacted to the training and what their test scores were, but we also collected data that showed that the coached observations were successful. as well as what their behaviors were on the job, and that they were able to actually perform the duties that they needed to perform to achieve the quality data collection effort that they had to do all the way across the country. So it was really very eye-opening and a great experience for me being a part of that as well. So I'm really appreciative of that opportunity to have worked with the Census organization.
Thank you all for the thoughtful responses. The next question that I wanted to pose is, what is the highest level of evaluation that you have been successful in achieving? And as a follow-up, what advice would you give to those who haven't reached there yet? Lisa, do you mind starting us off?
I don't mind. I was just reaching for my unmute there. As an organization, the IRS, we have a few programs that have actually obtained level 4, but I wouldn't go so far as to say the IRS as a whole is there. We really are focusing more on increasing our level 3 efforts at this point. We have 19 business units within the organization. Some play better, some not so much. So right now we're focusing more on the level 3s, and we have been increasing our participation at level 3 significantly. We have doubled our level 3 evaluations in the last 9 months. So we're moving in the right direction, and we're almost to a statistically significant sample size there, so we can evaluate our program as a whole. Our biggest challenges is that we have so many different business units, and their products and the services that they perform are so vastly different that in order to obtain really a measure that is significant for everyone is extremely difficult to do, and to isolate the training as the cause of any business measures. So we're looking at doing that more on an individual level for each of the programs. And for a service-wide measure, what we want to do is look at the increase in the individual measures and kind of combine those instead of trying to find one measure for everyone. So that's what we're looking to do for level 4. But as far as advice for those who haven't even gotten to level 3, honestly, my best advice is you just have to start. And this is what we're telling each one of our customers is you don't have to bite it all off at one time. Start with one program and evaluate that one program. If you don't ever start, you're never going to finish, but you can build on what you have started. So we are being effective with that. And once we provide the training and provide the tools to our customers within the business units to evaluate their programs, we have been getting more and more participation, and they find the successes in the evaluation once they start. It's overcoming that fear of the unknown is our biggest challenge.
And kudos to Lisa, because Lisa has been instrumental in giving the business units the confidence to take on the task of being committed to conducting level 3 behavioral analysis and evaluations, to be able to collect the data that show the impact of the training in the workplace. And that's something that, as she mentioned, for a lot of folks, it was just an intimidating ordeal for them to take on, and they didn't know if they would be able to do it, and they weren't confident in doing it. And so Lisa really structured her program to be able to offer training to those business units so that they could build their confidence in seeing that we provide templates, we provide structure to how they can go about conducting their level 3s. And that really is what they needed so that they could feel like they were supported in that endeavor. So kudos to Lisa for that great increase in having more and more folks do the level 3 evaluation.
So I thought of the answer to the question, so and I'll get to that in a second. But I think it's an interesting thing to pose out to the audience, and probably saying that like there's this almost implication that the higher the level, the better. But really, it's alignment with what you're doing is the most important thing there. I mean, I was just I was giving a strategic planning workshop right before this and jumped onto this call. And what we discuss is often those projects, initiatives that are high impact and require a high level of effort, right? Those are the things that are going to make or break you, and the ones you probably only take on one or two of them, every few years to get there. Absolutely, you need to go to the highest level of evaluation that you possibly can with those. Those are your new programs, those are your flagship programs, things you have out there. But for your courses, if it's a one-off course that people need to take on there, is it really bad going to the knowledge level? Because it's a lower effort that you put into potential, medium impact. So if you're, I guess the analogy I would use, like if you're running every race like it's a marathon, you're going to get tired very quickly. Some of them are going to be sprints, some of them are, so I don't think there's really a scale on which one's more valuable. That being said, the biggest one we've done, and Denise, you worked with Dr. Bill Brantley that I worked with was a level 5, like Phillips ROI, full on analysis of a coaching program that we ran internally there. And really was, being creative, going in there, treating it almost as a private coaching business. As we were going in there, looking at the cost, the training costs that we're putting, the attrition that we were expecting of each coach. Every year we were experiencing like 10 to 15% attrition per year. So we built that into the model. Also looking at the potential impact, what we looked at is, we knew that there was an issue with frontline supervisors and retention and also loss of productivity. So we came up, luckily other business units had those costs. We pulled those costs and said, okay, so if we study, and we almost did a controlled study on it, saying if we take group A who has had coaching, executive coaching and training these supervisors internally, compare them to group B and look at the overall, impact over a year or two and really cost it out, we can show some good financial measures for the impact that this program is having and show that it's a crucial part. But again, that program was a linchpin of a larger leadership development program. Will we go to that level of effort for every program we do? Certainly not. I couldn't have. It was almost, it took Dr. Brantley, who was working on it, it was almost his full-time job just to run that program and evaluate it. So yeah, it's great.
Really, really great point there, Dustin. As Jack Phillips himself will say, who is the author of the Phillips ROI model, really, you should only be looking at conducting ROI studies for maybe 5% of your programs, because it's going to be those that are most visible and those that are most costly that you're going to want to put the extra effort to do a full ROI study on. So absolutely spot on that.
If I can jump in, I want to dovetail into what Lisa was saying as far as making sure that when you're looking at your level 3s, you don't have to do a bunch of level 3s all at once. You can start somewhere, show the value. We do a lot of level 3s at TSA, which is fantastic because we need them, because we have people at all different types of airports all over the country. And what that means is there are a lot of things that people are required to do in one area that they are not required to do somewhere else. But it is no less a requirement. Okay, you will not be successful doing what you did in Dallas if you are in Las Vegas, but you will hold the same title. Now this goes to level 4s. Now, when I was in the Air Force, Air Education Training Command, we had what we called Chiefs Week. And for those of you that don't know, a chief in the Air Force is the highest enlisted person you can be, the highest worker bee. They strategize what they're going to do with their personnel. And when they come in, they decide what a person who is rated at a position should be able to do. And the reason why they're in the room is because they're looking for key performance indicators, and they're thinking, if I have to hand this individual over to another chief, what will they get out of this person? What can be the standard that they can expect? Okay, and then they pass that information off to the training group, the training command, and say, hey, when you're producing people at these level, I need to see that they can do these things, because as a chief, I will have to hand this to another chief when they go to another base or when they go downrange and they fight in theater. I don't have to think about what this person does, because when I look on paper, which is where my job is done, my job is not done on the battlefield next to the person. It's looking at the numbers, looking at human resources and understand that this human resource is equivalent to this other human resource because we've established a standard of performance. Now, establishing a standard of performance for strategy is one thing. That's your level 4. Establishing a standard of performance for your level 3, that's at that task level. It's more tactical. What are you going to be doing every day? So you have to achieve that strategy level, and then you have to go to the level 3. Now, how do you get from, say, a level 3 to a level 4? Well, first, you're going to need to prepare yourself for a lot of headache, because what you are asking is you are asking for people to be accountable for performance of people that they have never seen, that they will never speak to. The chiefs come in and they're talking about hundreds of thousands of individuals that will be under their supervision and what they should be capable of. And they are taking responsibility so that when people show up and they don't know what they're doing, well, chief, you didn't say this was something that they should know. You didn't say this is something that you wanted us to roll into the program. When the strategy changes for your organization, when the mission changes, when the environment changes, so shall the KPIs that are necessary to say that a person is ready to do the job. And that's what you have to sell to your supervision, that your training program has to be as agile as you are as an organization. And the only way to know that that is happening is to perform evaluations at these various levels, so that the day that you're standing next to your supervisor, swinging the hammer, you're doing the hammer right. However, when I need you to go somewhere else and you're going to be working with a saw, I need to know, because your position says that you work with power tools and a saw is a power tool, you can do it. So there is a lot of headache, but there is a path, and that path, believe it or not, is through education and educating your higher ups that their strategy can actually influence performance if they just share what their strategy is.
Excellent points, Frank. Nelson, please go ahead.
Yeah, so I definitely want to second what Frank was saying. Educating the key stakeholders, in a way, is more like showing them what is the foundation, because they might not be very familiar with the Kirkpatrick model. Let alone I have people confused between assessment and evaluation, saying that they are the same thing. I say no, those are different. And also, I want to echo what Dustin was saying is definitely we want to kind of pick on the high impact programs. And, for the decennial census, we fought the battle, and Frank, you were saying something about, trying to reach level 3 and level 4, and Denise could attest that it was difficult. And the way we had our, before we implement the 2020 census, we have census tests. So we have a 2016 test, and which is we selected a few sites and we begin to test our methodology, the blended training, our training packages. And for 2016, after 2016, or during 2016, we can only get up to level 3. All right. And Lisa was saying, build upon what you started. So we did build upon what we started on 2016 census test. In 2018, they begin to call for an end-to-end test. So they take out a snippet of each operation and do a ground 0 to 100% end-to-end test, and we tested again. And this time around, we actually submitted our 2016 training evaluation report to an oversight committee, and they look at it and they were giving us high compliments. And sometimes we submit to oversight, they always bring back with more questions. They say, okay, now you have it good, all right, and show us the evidence of training effectiveness associating with the field performance. And I was telling Denise, this is a one-way ticket, all right. We have the backing of the oversight committee, and we push for level 4. Because level 4 is holding everyone accountable, not just training, the programs, the operation, everything. And so we actually, harness that and march forward. So for 2018 end-to-end tests, we ramp all the way up to level 4. And for the actual 2020 census, there's a lot of data. all right? Because you talk about over 400,000 people, and kudos to PTG for doing, analyzing all the hard work. So I want to bring back to what advice, will I be able to share, if you haven't reached there. First thing definitely is I call the in-reach and the outreach, right? Internal stakeholders is key, because if I can convince my immediate supervisor there is a value in training evaluation, the decks of cards is going to fall pretty quickly, all right? And with that, I actually invited, PTG to come in and share, from a non-biased way, rather than hearing from Nelson, hearing from another person, another expert, in terms of the Kirkpatrick model, and make it in plain language. We're not going to throw out, the KPIs, or make it in really plain language so that they can digest. And then outreach, to the sponsors. So in my situation, I have sponsors from the decennial directorate that sponsors, the field to collect the data. And I also have to reach out to them and let them sink in. It's going to take time. And also involve them from the very beginning for buy-in. And because the last thing they want to hear is, what is a training evaluation report? And that will be a big surprise to them. And so involve them from the very get-go. And once we have the results, all right, let's go back 2016, we received the results. We review it with them, we ask them for feedback, because the results from the 2016 test, inform us how to improve our training for 2018, because we only have one shot every 10 years. And so when we come down to 2020, it's like we know there is a positive trajectory in terms of the success of the training program, because we have built upon 2016, we have built upon 2018. But one thing we did not, predict was the pandemic. But as what Denise was saying, because we have it in a blended training environment, we could, quickly pivot from there. And, though not ideal, because instead of having in-person, face-to-face classroom training, we pivoted to, self-study at home. Then after that, they have a conference call with the supervisor. My fingers was really a little cold, because that was not the exact, plan that we are looking for. But, thankfully, it actually worked really, really well, and so that's all I have to say.
Yeah, Dustin, I don't think anybody's ever asked me, where's that training evaluation report? Now I think about it up in the CC, it's like, please, can I have more of those? Unfortunately, besides myself, maybe, who loves to read those and go through them, but I think one thing that I think is a common theme between all of us is stating, and we're kind of getting around this, is the idea of accountability. And we want, as training evaluators, we want accountability. We want to show the value of our programs doing that, but it's not necessarily on the other side that they want to be vulnerable and have that sort of, Frank, you were mentioning performance data. It's been a lifelong struggle of mine to access performance data. I've worked at unionized environments, typically there, where it's a red flag if you even want to pull anything about how people are performing in this area in that way. And a lot of times for me, the only success I've had in that area, and it's kind of outside the realm, this is where you got to wear multiple hats when you're doing this. You can't just be the scientist, that is really, like you were talking about, Nelson, is going in there and convincing them and getting the buy-in of saying, yeah, we realize that this might show some of your warts as we investigate this, but hopefully we can show the performance improvements over there over time. We can point back to it and really help you. A lot of times, when I've negotiated with unions in that vein, I've had some success in that way of saying, we can work together on this. You all want training programs. I want training programs, but I'm losing my funding because I can't demonstrate, a tangible boost in performance in this way, and you guys are guarding the performance data. So can we find some way to anonymize? Can we figure out some way where I can get the data I need to design the programs that will help you all, achieve your mission? So a lot of times you got to think in terms of, buy-in in a negotiator sort of way, in a sales sort of way. It has nothing to do with training itself. So, developing those other competencies for training specialists is very important, because those things will make and break your evaluations in the end. If you can't get the data, you can't get your hands on the data you need, then you can't evaluate. So yeah, I'm glad you all brought it up.
That is absolutely true, and excellent points, everyone. The final question that I would like to pose is, what would you say is the biggest challenge that you have faced that evaluation helped you overcome?
So I'll take a step on that. So imagine, we are going for a hiking trip and someone say, at the summit, you're going to see a beautiful skyline and you're imagining, right, how beautiful it will be. And this is how I started. And, going up that, the mountaintop, as, Dr. Jim Kirkpatrick would like to say, you're climbing up the hill, all right, and you're trying to attain the level 1, level 2, level 3. Level 4 is a summit, all right, that we want to land and able to tell a good story. So my biggest challenge was not able to get to level 4, at the end of 2016 test. All right. And we tried ways, trying to explain the process, how painstaking, how painless it will be to get the data, but it's not. And then, as I said earlier, the oversight committee really, helped, push us forward. And that was, the request that really helped us, to move from level 3 to level 4. But in hindsight, if we had not done level 1, level 2, and level 3, we would not have landed at level 4. So everything, works together for a good purpose. And so I'm really, very confident to know that, And one of the key things is I also want to bring out is we really need to, look at the number of KPIs and not to be too, zealous in terms of getting a lot of KPIs. And, when I was working with Denise, it was like, let's focus on 3. If we can get 3, let's focus on 2. If we cannot get 2, let's get 1. Because in terms of the culture, the landscape, people might not be very, willing to share. And, take one step at a time. And I think, with that, we actually, build the confidence, that, we have a good story to tell. And we have reached the summit.
I'll jump in. I think for me, and it's been this way in a couple of different organizations, the biggest hurdle that we've been able to overcome is there is a cultural view from the C-suite and the executive level that generally training is an obligation or an overhead cost without recognizable impact. Okay, so some legislation somewhere, whether it's OSHA or whatever, says you have to train people to do this, or maybe it's a contract with a workers union that says that there has to be a career progression program. All right, so it's obligatory, you have to make it. But what does that get me? It is very difficult for people to recognize what training gives them as an organization when they're being told that they have to do it, because all they know is that they have to do it. Nobody's saying how it benefits them. And the evaluations, especially once you get to the level 3, that's where you really start to be able to show people this is where your performance has improved because of training. People are referencing their training as to why they did what they did on the job. They are applying things that are coming out of this huge structure that you've built to grow them as an individual. Or you can point out to them, our retention has gone up by 12% because people feel like they're going somewhere even though they stay here. It's very easy for people to feel like training is nothing but cost and it's mandatory and there really is no reason for me to do it other than I'll get my hand slapped if we don't. So the evaluations and pulling those metrics and showing those things have really helped me show in at least 2 different organizations that training is more to you than an obligation. It's an investment in yourself, it's an investment in your personnel, and there is always a positive return for both.
Yeah, I was thinking through over all of them. I'm going to have to go for myself. Is a diversity, equity, and inclusion program ran several years ago, And we didn't really have in a lot of level 3s or 4s built into that program, but a lot of courses, even the reactionary data on that one really helped me overcome, because there was a real resistance from leadership to do it. They were worried that it was going to dredge a lot of conflict out into the open. They were worried that people were going to react, resign, do all the sort of things that they didn't want to air the dirty laundry, in other words. I'm sure many of you are nodding your heads and saying, yeah, I've been through that one before. But what we convinced them was taking, even from our initial kickoff, taking the reactionary data from that, a lot of the anecdotal, we did have quantitative, qualitative, and not sanitizing it. We just did it there, and we dropped it on the agency. We said, here are the remarks we're getting from this. And some of them were ugly. They were some of the worst remarks I'd ever read in my life. And so there were a lot of assumptions that things weren't that bad at the agency, things across. But because we took the reactionary data and we didn't clean it up that much, and we dumped it back out there as it was, suddenly the mirror came up. There was a reflection. I was like, oh, this is who we really are. This is how we voiced it, because there were some slurs and other things that came in comments, and those things were certainly sanitized because management sanitized them. But even that level 1 had moved us forward. Now, when we got into some of the other content in the programs, we looked at behavior changes and things like that. Like we had a online program that was mainly based around a case study, but it put you in the pilot seat of a young Asian American woman who was in the office, and a lot of the microaggressions and things that she would go through. And it measured your behavior as you chose. It was like a choose your own adventure. So you're measuring that, and it would show the shifts in behaviors over the times that you take this. So you might begin choosing all the wrong responses that would be very aggressive towards her. And you didn't know it was very aggressive because you wouldn't know it. But, through a few iterations of that, you would see it trend towards, people's behaviors, the choices that they're making are changing based on their experience of being in the shoes of this person. So yeah, we had a lot of success in that program through building in those, because it is that area where people, I don't know, you've probably seen the news where people kind of shut off their minds and thinking and just saying, well, no, what I think is true, and I don't think this is a problem. But the data shows differently. And so I consider that a big win that we had for that program.
That was a powerful example. Thank you, Dustin. Lisa.
I think probably the biggest thing that we have done recently with evaluation, or what evaluation has helped us overcome, is the IRS is notoriously slow to obtain new technologies. And we have been operating off of, Skype and things that have been kind of by the wayside for years on end. And so we were actually able to show the justification with our training evaluations to justify the expense of upgrading those technologies and our virtual learning systems. A lot of times our senior leadership will come back and ask us after the fact to justify decisions that they made without our input. But for once, they actually looked at our evaluations before they made a decision on where they were going to go with those technologies. And that was huge for us, because yes, we use it in training, but every single person that has a computer at the IRS is using those technologies as well, not just for training, but for their everyday interaction. So it had a huge impact service-wide, and they were able to justify the funding to Congress. So yay, we're getting upgrades.
That's awesome. That's a really great, great story. So I think Rakaya wants to squeeze in one extra. We have about 15 minutes left. And, I have to say, this has so far been phenomenal discussion. I know that everybody who is on listening has definitely heard at least a couple of things that they can take away. So, it's really been wonderful to hear your expertise. You're obviously all have just such a wealth of experience, and your brilliance has really come out today. But I'm going to hand it back to Rakaya for her little final question.
So I know that some of our audience members are newer to the evaluation realm. So I wanted to ask what advice you would give to newer experts on obtaining buy-in for evaluation.
Would you repeat that for me, please, Rakai?
Yeah.
Sure. I wanted to ask, what advice would you give to newer evaluation experts on obtaining buy-in from leadership to conduct an evaluation?
My biggest advice, usually I work with our staff to talk about this, and subject matter experts, we've all worked with them, we understand it, and we forget that we ourselves are subject matter experts. So we often go into these conversations with all the passion of the subject matter experts. And I think that it sounds pessimistic, but it's very true. I always just tell them, imagine, they don't care about you or anything you're doing. They don't have the same level of passion that you do. You have to give them that level of passion. You have to convince them. And so I always do an exercise where I say, put the shoe on the other foot. Imagine, you have all these competing programs, you're in charge of the budget and everything else. And training is something it's exotic, you don't know about it. As we were talking about earlier, it can almost seem like a check in the box. So it gets bumped down to that. And you have to understand that viewpoint, because from their experience, that is true. Not to yours, because it's what you love dearly, and you will fight to the end for every dollar you can get to do that. But flipping that script helps you go in and say, well, what are their concerns? What are the things that are on their plate? What are the measures that they have to keep up with? And in that way, you can kind of strategize a little bit. As we go into, say, the higher level. Well, let's take an example from the lower level. So even if you're having trouble convincing them that reactionary data because they don't want to show the warts and all that sort of stuff, you go in there and say, I understand, and I've dealt with budget analysts and other people before that kind of divvy out our budget. They go in there and say, well, we don't see, other than this being a mandatory requirement, why we'd want to invest anything more in this. And I often say, well, what if, you're concerned about meeting those mandatory requirements, the legal ramifications if we don't, everything else. But what if this training program that we have is not effective in doing that? And you find some of the rates and say, well, we have all these, claims that are against us and everything else, and we have all this reporting and suggesting it. So it could be that the training program is. So what's the harm engaging the reaction to this, or even the knowledge level, to see if this is a good course, if this is something we're doing. And if it's not, we can substitute it, find something better that will, and that's going to be better for you in the end. So again, the biggest tip is thinking about what do they need and what do they want, not what you need and want, because that's not going to get your foot in the door.
Yeah, I agree with you wholeheartedly. The first thing that you have to do is figure out what is important to your leadership, and then you have to align how evaluations is going to help get them there. Because they already have priorities. You giving them a new priority is just giving them another headache. And since yours is the newest, well, it's going to go to the bottom of the list. But then once you let them know that, hey, this is how evaluations can help you with your priorities, there's a very important second part that you need to do that. And that is, you have to explain to them what happens if you don't do it. How is this going to negatively impact what you're already trying to do if you don't address it through evaluations? Once you can get both of those things in line, show them, hey, this is how I bolster you up with the priorities you already have and help you achieve the goals you already have that you're already working on. And this is how it's dragging you down. So if you don't want to address this, that's fine, but understand it's already affecting what you're trying to do. And it's affecting it in a negative way because you're not doing these things. So I can take this negative weight off of what you're trying to do and make it into a positive or a support, or we can ignore it and you can just let it work against you into the future. But you have to show them both of those things. It's a support if they help, and if they ignore it or don't do anything, then it really is just a weight dragging down on other priorities.
I think that's a really great view that you both have taken on that. Michael, who is new to the training world, was very excited to hear Rakai's question. And he also said that, is it true that you can't teach an old dog new tricks with regard to training evaluations? How do you address that hurdle? And I would add to that, in my experience with supporting so many organizations with training evaluation, One of our clients used to call in their training organization, they would have a champion of evaluation. And so they said, you really need somebody who champions evaluation within your organization, and also is someone that doesn't just wear a trainer's hat and says, we're the training department, you need us, and this is why, but rather reaches across and shows that they are really a business partner to the other operations management, that this isn't just overhead within an overhead organization, but it's actually a critical component to the success of the entire operation. Because if we send a bunch of folks out there that don't know how to perform their jobs and perform them well, then, you can only get so much learning done by osmosis, right? You really need to make sure that they're going to actually know what they need to do. And you also want to make sure that they don't go and learn the wrong skills or the wrong methodologies, because that's also the way we course correct, is by offering new training. And so, for example, if you have if you have an absenteeism issue in your organization, and so you try to restructure the culture of your organization to reduce that absenteeism. We had an organization that did that, and one of the things they did was they changed what the policies were around taking time off, and then they incorporated training to teach everyone about the new policy. And in that training, part of that training was a cultural adjustment to the importance of being present in your position and also being valued, right? So they did some soul searching on what the culture was that was promoting absenteeism versus promoting being a valued present person in your organization. So that's just another way that evaluations actually help to do that, because they made the change. And then when they did the training, they collected information about how people were perceiving the change in the culture and the change in the policy that was driving it.
So for me, personally, I think what helps me is I actually reach out to my supervisor and say, will you consider me taking the Kirkpatrick levels of evaluation certification? And that kind of gained the support. And, if you are in the program, at the end, you have to provide, the template for evaluation. And that's where, I use that as an opportunity, for discussion with my supervisor. And that triggers, the follow-up conversation and one after another. And as what Denise say is, she said, be the champion. I say, be the bright light, right? And because you are if you're the only person shining, in this dark world of training evaluation, and you have another person, the best person to shine together with you is your immediate supervisor. And once, that has been done, there will come an opportunity for a platform to be able to share, the importance of evaluation. And definitely, bringing back to what Frank was saying, alignment to the mission of the organization, the strategies, because you don't want to be on the outlier, because that will never be supported in terms of resources, in terms of manpower. And once the support has been given, start small, all right? A reaction level, because we have to build up, one after another. Because, we always say beginning with the end in mind. I know, Dr. Kirkpatrick always say you want to look at, the very, the end of the business, the business results. But, we have to kind of imagine that. And then from there, start small and build upon it. I think that is critical.
Yeah, and to put a period on that one too, I always try to bring it down to the simplest level. I have a 7 and a 5-year-old, and I always call it the green eggs and ham problem, because that's literally what it is. It is, they've been served up the same sort of stuff. They're not willing to try it because they already have that barrier there, right? There's a lot of assumptions and other sort of stuff that go into it. It's preconceived stuff that was there before you even entered the picture about what is a training evaluation. most organizations that I've entered have a standard evaluation, or at least it was reactionary at level 1, and that's all they've ever known. So why would they expect anything different when I go to them and say, we're going to do this and do that? They haven't tried it, and they're refusing to try it because they haven't had a good experience with it in the first place. So, typically it is sneaking in, like you were saying there, Nelson, like getting in a little bit here and there, building it up, taking it slowly, and building upon what you have there to kind of slip it in and show them that there's an alternative, that there's something better out there. A lot of times this is where the value, being here together is hearing stories about what somebody else has done successfully, getting an example of that, taking it back to your workplace and say, here's what Census has done. Look at this. And they're like, oh, interesting. So they're starting to confront their preconceived notions about what evaluation could be and what it can achieve. And then once they are a little bit, their interest is a little bit piqued, that's when you slip in and say, can we try it just a little bit? Let's try it on this course. Let's do that. And once you see the benefits of it, you're in. And then it's just, don't rush it though. I mean, you're not going to get anybody to jump to like a level 4 immediately from that. It will take some time to do that.
Thank you so much. We have just a couple of minutes left, so I wanted to check in with the panelists to see, is there anything that you would like to share about your evaluation strategy that hasn't been mentioned?
The biggest thing I've always noticed, and Lisa, you mentioned it, it's always that sort of thing in there, is isolating, the variables and doing all that sort of stuff. I've heard that thrown out, I think, since the beginning of time when training first became evaluated. Don't let that be a hurdle for you. You will never be able to isolate every variable in the world. And there's certain assumptions. Remember, data, I think we always look at it as a straight line. But in reality, if you collect enough data on anything in our programs, there's going to be outliers. There's going to be people that don't follow the model of it. But as you plot those points, you'll start seeing the trend there. And if you get enough data, you'll see it. So you got to ignore those people who don't necessarily fit that model. There might be exceptions. There might be somebody, as you start measuring behaviors at level 4s, that is an outlier. That's fine. They're a squeaky wheel, they're not indicative of the pattern or the trends of it. So you got to collect enough data to show that and get over kind of the exceptions to the rule. Because, that's what data scientists do. Not everything is going to follow the model.
Yeah, and I would add to that, what I do, which is very similar, is I'm telling them that this data is the metrics before the metrics that hurt. Okay, so there's a lot of business people that think, if you can't measure it, you don't do it. And so then they measure things and like, oh, this is awful, you're fired. Oh, this is awful, let's reorg. That's great, but that's like the year end. That's like at the 2-year completion of a project. Evaluations, just in the training realm, but in all realms, it lets you know, like I was saying, about the trend. You need to see where things are going. But this is internal. This doesn't hurt, right? This is you being objective with your organization and what you're doing, so that you know that when people come in who don't care that you work very hard and that you put in 70-hour work weeks but still failed, when those people come in to do their evaluation, you will already know what you need to be working on. You will have plans in place to bolster yourselves up where there are shortfalls, and then you'll know what you can highlight when people are saying, hey, tell me what's good. Tell me why you're a success here. Evaluations is very much the metrics that don't hurt. And that's the strategy that I use, is like, you need me to tell you what's going on now before someone from outside the organization tells you about yourself.
Well, I just want to share with you that Chris King, who's listening in, has said this entire discussion has been priceless. What an amazing collection of success stories with all the cheers and tears. Thanks to the panelists for sharing. And Laniera Jones also said that she loved that saying, Frank, metrics before the metrics that hurt. So I think we're all going to be stealing that one. So, very, really valuable insights that you've all provided today. And with that, we are at our 2 p.m. mark.
So I just want to give a big thank you to all the panelists. I know that the audience thinks that this was such a valuable discussion, and hopefully they gain little nuggets of wisdom along the way. So thank you again. And with that, I will end the panel. Have a
Thanks
good day,
so much.
everyone. Bye.
Thank you.